Hello Masters, welcome to the Swadhyaya Challenge. Today we have Prathyusha with the next set of Agartha. So we have completed 2 sessions and this is the third session. Prathyusha, it's all yours. Thank you Prathyusha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pushpa Master. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. As Pushpa Master said, today is session 3 of the book Agartha. So before we get into that, let's extend our gratitude to Brahmarshi Patriji for providing us this beautiful platform, and also to the PSSM USA Book Club for organizing this sessions actually. And last but not the least, I would also like to extend the gratitude to Agartha Masters, who's helping this as well. All right, let's just a brief recap from session 2. So last week, what we discussed is about Tim actually goes to Sweden to visit his grandmother, and he spends a good number of months over there. And after trying making all his efforts to notify the people in Sweden about his visit to Agartha, and it didn't turn out to be what he anticipated, right? So then he decides to go back to Seattle. And after he reaches Seattle, he realizes that his friend Matt, he actually passed away in an accident. So with that, what happens is, he decides to take Matt's daughter, which is Ellie, as well as Matt's wife, Nancy, back to Agartha Kingdom. And he also tries to call his grandmother and say that, hey, why don't you come to Seattle? Let's go to Agartha, which is a fifth dimensional, which is in the inner core of the earth. And he graciously accepted. And along with the grandmother, if you remember the Titch, the dog is also joined Tim into Agartha Kingdom. And once they are there, everything was pretty different for Nancy as well as the little girl, right, Ellie? But they're still trying to cope up, and they are trying to visit the Telos city. So they go to they try to visit the library, right? So the library was very different, right? It was huge, it was humongous, and the way they teach there is very different. The people who are really interested to read books, they can read, but there is also another concept of teaching, which is by acting, which is by a play kind of a thing, right? And we also discussed about that. So that's where we stopped. And we were trying to figure out if Nancy and the little girl, are they going to stay back, or are they going to go back to the surface of the earth, right? That's what we were trying to figure it out. So now let's get into that in today's session. So basically, after the library visit, right, they come outside and they're talking about. Tim was trying to explain, kids here, the way the learning is very different. There are no schools here. Children are educated at the library if their parents desire it. They learn to read and write and other useful things, right? But it's just not the education in the same way as we have it on the earth. The people who really, or the kids who are really interested to read and write, they'll do that. But there are kids who doesn't want to do that, which is still accepted over there, right? But the teachers over there try different alternative methods, like painting, craft, singing, stories, right? That's what that's also a form of learning. So that's what actually Tim is explaining, Nancy. And now, but Nancy, she was interrupted by Ellie, and who came rushing with another girl. So because now Ellie is also in that library, right? And that library, if you remember, it's called the world's biggest library, including the libraries that we have on the surface of the earth. So she meets another girl. Her name is Wendy, and that girl talks English, and she is also from the surface of the earth, who came inside, very similar to this little girl Ellie. She also come to Agartha Kingdom, and they both were having good time. They were talking English and all of that. And Nancy is still wants to go back, right? She says there is no proper school, and I miss so many things here. I don't like this country. She doesn't like Agartha, and she wants to go back to Seattle. And she never put her house to sale actually. And now, and as they continue the journey in the hovercraft, now they go in. They're actually hovercraft, as you know, it's actually it's a flying kind of a machinery, right? So when they were doing that, they saw a beautiful boats, which are very different from the boats that we have on the surface of the earth. These boats were actually painted with beautiful art. And these boats were actually in the form of some animals, like, the boats itself looked in the shape of elephants, tigers, lions, turtles, dolphins, and all that. So there was even a horse boat as well. So that's the difference that they were noticing while they were going on to the going on the hovercraft. And as I said in one of the previous sessions, right, there are also dragons in Agartha Kingdom. As we know that there are a lot of animals like lions and tigers, and these animals are pretty safe, right? Because the vibrations over there, there is no anger, there is no fear, and all. So the animals are also pretty fearless. They're very affectionate. They don't harm human beings over there in Telos. And apart from those animals, there are also dragons actually. And dragons at one point were on the earth, surface of the earth, but they decided to disappear from the earth, right? Why? Because humans began to hunt and kill more and more of them actually. They had stayed and made Agartha as their kingdom, as their home actually. They had taken refuge in the Agartha kingdom. And some of them were tame and used as transport. So dragons are also used as a mode of transport as well. So that's pretty interesting, right? So we have read about dragons in some of our books, but it's interesting to know that dragons are also are living in Agartha, in fact. And flowers and spices, right? So here, when we have flowers and plants and all of this, grow them in beds, right? There, the seeds and everything is pretty, they strew them in the wild and allow them to spread to be picked when needed. So they don't make any beds to grow plants and all of that. So that's another thing, which is slightly different from here versus there. And they also visit a family over there, and they actually give it a tea-like drink, which is consumed instead of coffee. We consume coffee and tea here. There they give a different. They drink a different drink, which is tea-like, but not exactly tea, right? So they are not used to drinking anything which is coming out of the animal, actually, right? So, and they don't make cakes or anything, right? Which has like sugars and all of this. Like, they eat pretty much very, very much like bread or vegetables and all of that. And the people in Agartha looks very young. Why do they look young? Because they're always happy and they're always eat good and healthy food. That's another thing that they highlighted in this book as well. So they never age. It's basically they continue to, like Tim, even though he had been in that kingdom, in the Agartha kingdom for a good number of years, he remained the same throughout his journey in Agartha, because he never aged actually. So that's another thing that they highlight as well. So similarities and differences, right? So the more you see of Agartha, the more you wonder that the outer and inner earths exist in such close proximity to one another. But there are similarities and differences, right? If you remember the differences in the buildings, infrastructure, but similarities in the scenery, but how people and animals are very connected, right? In the Agartha kingdom, unlike the people on the surface of the earth. So that's the difference on the nature and animals. Okay, let's move to the next session. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, if not, now let's discuss about what Nancy wants to do, right? So Nancy is not very happy about her visit, because she was expecting something else, and she didn't. She wasn't very happy because there was no schools, and the concept of food was different. The concept of day and night was pretty much the same, so she couldn't adapt in the Agartha kingdom. So she decides to actually leave. She wants to go back to surface of the earth because she wants to leave the Agartha kingdom. And yeah, before that, I missed one more point. Actually, when they're actually coming out of the library, if you remember the grandmother, right? Grandmother's name is Emily. So grandmother meets another guy who is 60 plus years or so. He is also another person who came from the surface of the earth to the Agartha kingdom very recently. And grandmother meets that guy Lex, and they both became very good friends when they were talking outside of the library. So now, so Lex, if you see here, Lex, right? So all the people who entered into the Agartha kingdom, they didn't come just like that, right? So there is a reason they have come. They have been chosen, right? If you look at Tim, Tim didn't come just like that. His ship was wrecked, but then how come he was the only person he was saved? By Manuel, right? So there is a reason that he came, because he has a certain vibrations who could potentially become a fifth dimension. Yes, he's still a third dimension, but who has the ability to get to the fifth dimension being, right? So that's how he ended up. And similarly, Lex, similarly, grandmother, right? If she wouldn't have been spiritual, she wouldn't even have believed Tim that there is a whole Agartha kingdom, right? So these are all eligible people to go to Agartha kingdom. Nancy wasn't eligible, but then Manuel couldn't really say no when Tim asked, "Hey, Nancy," he wants to bring Nancy because Nancy is his friend's wife, right? Tim's friend's wife. And Tim decided to bring her, and that's the reason Manuel accepted. But if she could have adapted, she could have stayed back. But again, she couldn't adapt, so now she wants to go back. So now, if you remember, how does she has to go back? She has to go back to through the tunnels, get to Mount Shasta, and eventually take a flight and go back to Seattle. But how she has to get some all this financial support as well, right? Because now she has to take care of that little girl when she goes back. So Manuel says we'll give her all the financial support. She'll be getting like a lot of precious gems and all that, and you can take her. And what Manuel is saying is, you might have to help her, Tim. I will drop you at Mount Shasta, the tunnel, but then you might have to help her get onto the flight, um, eh, on the Seattle flight, and then you can come back, is what Manuel says. And Tim agrees, and then he actually goes. Okay, but so the next day morning, now they're ready to go to Mount Shasta, and from there to Seattle. So let's hear the conversation of what happens between Nancy and Tim, right? So Nancy, Tim, the little girl, Ellie, and Titch, all of them will sit in a hovercraft, and they're going actually into the vehicle, right? So Nancy is not happy, right? Nancy avoided looking at Tim, and she's saying, I had expected you to be more honorable, and I never believed my husband's best friend would be so unreliable. And Tim was very surprised. How am I unreliable actually? First you came on to me, and then as soon as you came here, you cast me aside for that other girl actually. And he actually likes another girl, Cecilia. And when especially I think, yeah, and she says that, I she felt betrayed, and this is not a paradise, which you said that this is a paradise and all of that. Tim says, to be eligible to live in this place, we all have to have 7 virtues, which is appreciation, compassion, forgiveness, humility, understanding, valor, and unconditional love, of course. So these 7 virtues are important for anybody to live in the Agartha kingdom. Um, And Tim says clearly that, yes, I do like Cecilia, but then I have never encouraged you. Your interpretation about me was different, but I never encouraged you, right? And after some time, Nancy asked, can't you forgive me so things will be like the way they were before? She asked. Then she's saying, because once you forgive, then I can come and visit you once in a while to the Agartha kingdom, is what she's asking. But Tim says, I don't think you can come back here. You came here just because I asked you to come, and that's now I don't think you are eligible to come here, is what Tim is explaining. And Nancy gets upset, right? But there's a lot of conversation which happens between both of them, but he feels a little bit, bad. But again, Titch, remember the dog was there, and the Titch actually licked his hand, and he started feeling better at once. Dogs are not just our best friends; they are more than that. Actually, they are our consciousness, good or bad. So Titch and Tim both will return back to Telos, and they actually go and meet Arniel, right, and Manuel, and they say that, forgive her and pray that she gets the help she needs. Let go of all your thoughts about her. Transmit light and love to replace the bad. And look for new adventures which he has to explore in Agartha, so that he can completely stop thinking about what happened and just do the next things that he's supposed to do in the Agartha kingdom. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, and now again they're back in hovercraft. Now it's only Manuel, grandmother, Lex, if you remember I was talking about the 60-year-old person, right? And Tim, the dog, Titch, and Wendy. Who is Wendy? Wendy is the other little girl. And Edmund and Pierre. So they are the other third dimensional beings who came from surface of the earth as well. So all of these people, they're in the hovercraft and they're visiting still different places in Telos. And now they meet this person called Saint German, actually. Saint German is actually from a totally different dimension, actually. He's a star being, actually. Agartha kingdom is a fifth dimension. So Saint German lives in probably, I don't know, like maybe in like ninth dimension or eighth dimension. But once in a while, he comes to Agartha kingdom, actually. Right? And then he came to meet these third dimensional beings, who is Tim, grandmother, and all of these folks. They are still third dimensional beings. They haven't become fifth dimension yet. There are certain process that they have to go through, but these people are eligible, right? Who can potentially become a fifth dimensional being. That's the reason they ended up in Agartha, in Telos and Agartha kingdom. So grandmother says, I recognize you. Are you an author? Are you an actor? Are you British? Are you Swedish? She's kind of asking all these questions. He says, everybody calls me master. I come from the stars. And at one point, I was incarnated on earth as a spiritual teacher long before Jesus Christ. And he lived in France in the reign of Louis XIV. I'm a spiritual leader to many people who live now. And here is one of my loyal peoples, as large as life, this little lady who is asking, who am I? So at one point, grandmother did meet Saint Germain, right? And she doesn't remember, but Saint Germain does actually. Okay, so moving on. He's still explaining, right? I have lived in and visited other dimensions before settling where I am. Telos is part of the area I am responsible for. There are plenty of wise masters here. I am in charge of a movement and organization for innovation. In Telos, I have a physical body, but in other parts of the Agartha, which are completely fifth dimensional, I don't have a physical body, right? And a lot of manufacturing. So he's responsible for all this innovation, right? Interestingly, in Telos, they have a lot of beautiful machinery, interesting machinery which they make, right? How do they make? It's just the thought process, actually. They, if you see here, they were incredibly impressed and surprised at the variety of things that could be produced without machinery in Agartha. Okay, so because of the masters, right? Now grandmother is saying that, hey, I'm glad the search is over. This is the place that I want to grow old. But son German is saying that you will never grow old here. You will only get younger and younger. Aging is something that happens on the surface of the earth. And it's completely and actually unnecessary. The reason we have aging on the earth is because the thought process that we always have, right? Which automatically makes our hair gray and all of that. But on the surface of the earth, there is, you always become younger and or remain the same, actually, and very healthy. Okay. And now let's come, this is another interesting thing, right? So they go near a cafe, and they making sure the hungry children had food, ordered some for us, and they want to pay the money, right? How do we pay? I haven't seen anyone produce a wallet since we came. No currency, no coins. And it was grandmother who pointed it out here, right? And Lex saying that here payment is different. There is no money on telos, just service. We take something and we provide service. We exchange goods and we don't waste anything. There are collection areas for exchange instead of shops. It's well organized. That's the interesting part, right? So yeah. So there's no shops to buy, rather exchange places where you go give your stuff and get something. I don't know if you have noticed, and back in very olden days, right, in the villages, they used to exchange a lot of things, right? Equal concept of money, but he, you give me this, and then we give certain other goods for the equal value of the money. All right. So now, as they travel in the hovercraft, right? So they see two different buildings. Actually, these buildings are called houses of God's love. This is one of them is actually greenish color, which glows very interesting, and it is glittered with precious stones, and that's called the Jade Temple. Okay, it wasn't in any particular style. This temple, it was like a fairy tale castle with towers and pinnacles, more decorative afterthoughts than necessities. It was very beautiful. And they also have buildings for meditation, actually. Right. And I know in one of the sessions they were talking about pyramids, right? Could be these buildings are pyramids. They didn't explain that in this book, what those buildings looked and how those are, but that could be it, yeah. And the precious stones covering the walls cast a dull shimmering gleam across the hall. There were plenty of comfortable couches, chairs, and all of that. People were sitting lost in meditation or just resting. We found our way to do so. So these buildings were basically called houses of God's love. Okay, let's as they were explaining about the crystals, right? Energy comes from crystals hooked up to electromagnetism, which will last 500,000 years. The magnetic field of Earth has always been a mystery to scientists on the surface. Our inner sun in the earth, center of the earth, is a mysterious power source which generates a magnetic field around our planet. Right. So this is where they're talking about food and all, right? Good food and fine thoughts keep you youthful and extend our lives. They have been vegetarians for 12,000 years. Right? And this is good for our figures, will teach you. We are planning to come to the surface and offer help. The schedule is not definite yet, but our need grows more urgent. We already have PMCUSA up there. So whenever I think they are ready, they're going to come and teach the surface of the earth beings. So All right. So moving on, right? So now they want to go to a different place now, right? Where they want to explore more and more. But for that, they want to put Ellie as well as the other little girl, Wendy, in the library. Why library? Because these kids can have fun, right? In the form of different forms of learning, artwork, reading books, and all of that. So they actually leave them in the library, and now they're going on to next place. What is that place? Which is Shambhala, right? Shambhala is also called as the paradise of the core earth as well. All right. So now, so Sisila, right? So Sisila is actually taking them. The manual is not taking them. Sisila is going to take them to Shambhala, right? And Tim likes Sisila, right? But I don't like. He did not express anything to Sisila yet. But basically Sisila and Tim was very happy to see Sisila as the tour guide to Shambhala actually. And she's going to explain each place in English, and they head on to Shambhala. Okay. There are numerous groups of trees in this country which are landing places. They all lead somewhere. So, okay, they're still up in the air. So they are still traveling, and finally they actually reached the capital city, which is Shambhala. And the place has played many roles in history. It is allegedly in the Gobi Desert in another dimension, actually. So it is basically in the center of the surface of the earth, actually. At the center of within the core of the earth, which is Shambhala is in the center. And as soon as they land in Shambhala, grandmother says, grandmother was mesmerized looking at, Shambhala is full of glittery and very beautiful, where the streets are of gold, the houses are made of marble, and symphonies and music is continuously playing actually. There were beautiful people clad in white, and there is a high seat of the great masters. Do you mean that we are really there? Each house they were passed was a poem, a temple. I have never seen such beautiful buildings before. It's completely made of beautiful crystals, actually. There was something fragile about these people who were not as firmly fleshed as us. There were huge variations, and some were hardly human except in form. Shambhala is a vast place with many races and different types of beings. They all had one thing in common: love of the highest source and of others. The power of love flowed through this palace, filling our hearts with such happiness that it nearly hurt. So, because Shambhala is a fifth dimensional place, right? And the buildings are completely different, very beautiful. There's music everywhere, all through the streets. The love and affection, the vibrations is what they could really feel in Shambhala, actually. All right. Any questions so far? Okay. So now they are in Shambhala, right? Um, so the animals, right? So they get to meet different animals, and she actually says that you have to be very if you in the front of the animals, the only thing which Sisila says is you have to vibrate it. Shouldn't be afraid of. If you're afraid of, the animals might not do anything. But again, you should always give the happiness and the love and no fear when you're around the animals, and then you will enjoy meeting animals and all of that. And that's how they meet different animals, then experience that in Shambhala actually. And here, and another thing, right? Grandmothers see beautiful flowers in Shambhala, and she was ready to pick a flower, and Sisila stopped her. And we are not allowed to pick the flowers. Only the growers can take what they need. If you pick a flower, you interfere with the floral group soul, creating a gap for all eternity. It can't be repaid, right? So the concept there is, let the nature and the beauty reside, right? And we are not supposed to pluck the flowers and disturb the nature and the beauty. And this is one of the reasons, I believe, right? So Patriji always said, don't pick any flowers. So that's another thing. So fifth dimensional beings are doing there. Flowers which know they will be picked for their smell, spice, or edibility give themselves up bravely, right? Praying for help and forgiveness for the pickers. Right. So what she's saying is, if the flowers has certain spice, they give them like they're ready. Actually, they're ready and they fall off by themselves, and we can take it up. But we are not supposed to pick the flowers. And grandmother says, "How interesting, right?" And she's smiling at that. Enough weddings and love in Agartha. Okay. So this is another thing which is completely different in the Agartha kingdom versus what we have in how weddings happen in on the surface of the earth and in the Agartha kingdom. But before we get to that, let's talk about 1 2 slides about this actually. So Cecilia went into grandmother's house. So Tim, as you know, right? Tim likes Cecilia. So Tim kissed Cecilia briefly when we left the meadow after meeting the animals. Grandmother had given us a knowing look and couldn't hide a smile of delight. This is what Tim is saying actually. So, and finally he decides to express, right? Will you be my wife? And I had no idea what weddings were like in this part of the world. But Cecilia laughed and answered by singing out yes while dancing some graceful steps. I got up and danced with her until grandmother came with a tea tray. So both of them decided to basically get married, which is called married on the surface of the earth, but uh, in the Agartha kingdom, it's called love union actually. So let's get into some of the next slide to understand how these weddings happen. The terminology is slightly different, but yes. Now, Tim says, Grandmother Emily, we are going to get married. Cecilia has agreed, and now we have to draw up some plans. Let's make it a double wedding. Laughed grandmother, right? I have just accepted Lex to be my husband today. So grandmother and Lex also wants to get married as well. Cecilia looked surprised. Double wedding, getting married? Because that concept is very new for her, right? She has always been in Agartha kingdom. She has never heard about the whole married word. So that's not how we do it. You will get to know how we do it here. It's called something called love union, and I really didn't care about the details and all for the. That's what Tim was mentioning here. So Cecilia goes home, and there was a knock, and Manuel. It was Manuel, and Manuel comes, and he wanted to tell him about my coming marriage and ask him what it would be like. It's not quite like an earthly wedding, he laughed, thumping me on the back. It's just a love union where both sides decides to continue their lives together. A teacher blesses the union. We don't have divorce. There is no concept of divorce. Once you are in that love of union, you are bound to be in that relationship and commit to that relationship, right? We don't have priest who to do the ceremony here. It's just a teacher will bless a union. And where is, if you remember, where are the teachers? Teachers are only in the library. So the weddings, or I shouldn't say weddings, the love union happens in the library. There are no priest, nothing. So they just go to the Pothologus, which is a library. They go there, and one of the Arnial master or somebody, they say, they blesses the union of the couple, and they're married. So it's as simple as that actually, unlike on the surface of the earth. And they're also saying that You both will be wearing white. We don't use tiaras and veils, and the clothes don't matter as long as they are white. You can dress up anything as long as they're white, right? The couple can be alone, or if you want to bring in a few friends, you can bring, but there is no officially, they're not invited on the in Agartha kingdom. Why? Because most of them are fifth dimension beings, right? Using the telepathy itself, they get the invitation. They know that this couple is getting married, um, or going to be in love union, right? So that's what they say. When they get, so they just come actually without invitation. They go to the library, whoever can, they go to the library, they just wish them, and that's it. There's no concept of inviting, invitations, and all of that. So that's the interesting part. Um, and then there will be a slight reception where, the people will dance and have some food and drink and all of that. But that's the process for the weddings over there. And what about rings and all of that, right? There is no concept of rings as well over there, but they can give a small token of jewelry, but it doesn't have to be like super expensive or anything. But there is no concept of exchanging rings, garlands, or anything of that sort. Okay, so manual says I will bring both of you a small jewelry so that you guys can give each other, and at the time of the wedding in the library, and that's it pretty much is what he says. All right, so next, moving on. The next day morning, the manual comes holding something in white, and the both of them will get dressed, and manual also was holding some beautiful jewels in his hand. Okay, one of that was a necklace with a pendant that glittered with diamonds. Diamonds were commonplace here and beautiful. The pendant was heart shaped with a ruby in the center and artwork by a goldsmith. Love unions take place in the mornings here, Manuel continued, as early as possible. Your grandmother and her husband to be are ready, and your bride is waiting impatiently in the bridal suit. Okay, so both of them will get on to the hovercraft, because Manuel and Tim, and they go to that library, which is the world's biggest library, which is the entrance of the Port Loggers. And, they just get ready. And who is the teacher? Master Arniel, right? He suddenly appears in that because he's a fifth dimensional, right? He can just come, and he smiled at all four of them: grandmother, Lex, Cecilia, and Tim. And then and he placed his hands on our brows. We were one wholly united, as if we lived in each other and were each other. It was a magical moment and lasted for ages. I couldn't say how long. It felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes in our time. So basically, he blesses everybody, all four of them, and now they are in a wedlock. Now they are married, actually. Okay, you're joined in matrimony, as you say on the surface, declared Arniel. We don't consider word necessary for this ceremony. You may go home, as I guarantee there will be a crowd outside waiting to congratulate you. Okay, so that's how weddings happen in Agartha kingdom. Okay, so with that, any questions? Any questions on how weddings happen? And you might also be wondering, right? Sicila has always lived um, in Agartha. She's a fifth dimensional being, right? And Tim is a third dimensional being who could get on to fifth dimensional being, right? But they are married. They're married, but yes, Tim eventually becomes a fifth dimensional being, more towards the end of the book. Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's all we have for today's session. I think we'll have one more session, and I think we can wind up the book. All right, Pooja, I see your hands raised. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Prathyusha Master. Thank you for the session. So I missed a session in between, like from the last month. So for you mentioned about green jade temple in the Telos, right? That was a temple. I told you that day, if you remember, the person we met at the Mount Shasta was wearing that green crystal jade.
Ah, right. Uh-huh. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
the Thunder Eater, and also one of the member from the trip, the group. She found jade at the Ascension rock after the meditation.
I see. Interesting. Okay, okay,
So
cool.
when you mentioned about the jade temple, green, I suddenly got this vision of like she got that crystal and we didn't know the name of the crystal. We took the picture and Google Lens like to check what is this crystal, what is the name of the crystal, and it was jade.
It
And
was
you mentioned it here. So there was a connection I felt. Yeah.
nice, 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 very nice. Okay. Awesome, awesome.
You.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you for the session. It was wonderful.
Yep, thank you. I see Prakash Master's hands raised.
Ma'am, it was a very great session, ma'am. I have been following this session past in YouTube, ma'am. This is first time I joined live session, and really amazing, ma'am. This book is. And is there any possibility that hence you read this whole book, ma'am? Is there any possibility that we can go into the inner earth, and is there any methods described in the further sessions, ma'am, by in that book?
No, in this book, there is no, they haven't described any methods as such, but all they have said is there are 7 or 8 entry points to get into inner earth. So one of them for sure is at the Mount Shasta. Another one is through Himalayas for sure, and another one is through Pyramid of Giza. Also has a tunnel entrance, and there is also one entrance in Italy, somewhere in Italy. But they haven't described anything as such. Yes, yeah. But what I know is you might have seen in a lot of videos as well, right? Earth is getting into the fifth dimension, right? Earth is transforming into fifth dimension. So again, the timeline and all is not given in this book, but in this book also they say that Earth is in the path or in the journey to get into the fifth dimension, actually. And yeah, yeah, there is no, they haven't given any year or anything as such. But I know some of the masters have been saying that from 2030 onwards, I think the ascension is going to be much more faster, right? 2029 or 2030 onwards. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I have read that 2032 in many books, ma'am.
Yep.
In Western also and in Indian books also, ma'am.
Yep. Yep.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yep. Thank you. Yep. Thank you. Thank you all for joining today's session. So we have one last session, and with that, we should be able to wrap up the book. But at the end of that session, I would like to listen from you, if possible. What were some 3 things that you got connected in this book, actually, if possible, right? I'm actually planning to go through some of the 10 points at the end of the next session, which I got connected, and maybe we can just review that. If that works. Okay, awesome. Yep. Next Wednesday, I don't think I'll be able to take the class due to some commitment, but I should be back again the following Wednesday, and we should be able to complete it.
Okay, thank you, Prathyusha. Thank you so much. You explained it very beautifully about the lifestyle. So thank you for bringing us the lifestyle. Like, what is Agartha? It's yeah, it's pretty. What do you call? తెలుగులో చెప్పాలంటే చాలా అద్భుతం, ఆశ్చర్యం అన్నట్టుగా అనిపిస్తుంది. ద క్రక్స్ ఆఫ్ ద అర్త్, there is a life, there is a sunlight, there is like how flowers and how people are there, how weddings. It's beautiful. Thank you for doing this.
So, yeah, thank you everyone, and thanks Pushpa Pastor for making this possible. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah.